Hey friends. It's a beautiful Wednesday early afternoon in Albuquerque. And I was just playing a little piano. There's a piano tuner out there now, making the piano sound even more beautiful. So, what a great day. I had a flash of inspiration, or it was almost like an image of something come up the other day, and I tracked it, and I just haven't. I thought I would talk about it on my post that day, but then whatever other things happened. But I saw a quote somewhere, I forget, and it might have been something like, I don't know, a church flyer, or it could have. I truly don't remember if this was online or if it was like something that came in the mail or what it was, but clearly it was meant to find me. The quote was, or the phrase was, "We are guided not by sight, but by faith." And what flashed immediately in my imagination, or in my mind, was this sense of something that I know to be true from my own experience as a meditator. There's this weird thing that when I'm meditating consistently, which at this point I generally am always meditating consistently. I'm not always meditating, like when I'm, the more I meditate, the more this is true. In other words, the more time I put in at it, the more this is true. But it's kind of like a sense organ, in the sense of, like, my eyes see stuff and I know where stuff is, right? Like, the purpose of sense organs is to tell us where stuff is in various ways. I mean, sight is kind of the most obvious. It's the most, in some ways, it's the one that I think we orient to most immediately, because it describes our environment. We don't want to walk into things. Anytime we move, anytime we see someone, talk to someone, we're using the sight sense to perceive the reality. Now, obviously, we're also using our ears and the sense of sound, and I think, there's probably a fair amount of science to support that we're using all our other senses to degrees that we may not even be aware of. But meditation and the stillness of meditation, that place that we find, is like a sense organ that, if we're not using it, we don't know we have it. And even when we begin to use it, it can take a while before we trust that it's real. There are things you start meditating, and all of a sudden your life starts to change. You start to see things differently in life. Different relationships enter our life. Different opportunities enter our life. And it's kind of like, I imagine, if sight is the sense organ that lets us steer our body through our day, through our house, through our town, through the world, that inner stillness, that place of deep stillness, is what we use to steer our deeper self, our soul, our psyche, whatever we want to call that level of our being. It's a sense organ that begins to become a navigational tool for that dimension of our being. And And so I love this phrase, we're guided not by sight but by faith, because very quickly it evoked for me the idea have eyes closed, not being able to see, but having a perfectly clear navigation system, and having something, and that it, and not I mean, again, I don't know that I can't claim to understand what this quote meant. I can't even, like I said, tell you where it was, where it came from, or what context it was offered in. All I can tell you is what it evoked in me, and it provoked this connection immediately or like a flash of recognition that, oh yeah, that's like the steering wheel for our deeper self. And so, and I noticed this, when I go through phases where my meditation, where I'm doing less of it, where for whatever reason, maybe I'm sleeping a little more, going to bed a little later. Some of these periods where I have a major project on my plate, they kind of tilt me into biasing or privileging my other work, even though I've declared very firmly and very unwaveringly that spiritual practice, inner work, that core of everything is my number one priority. It's still a practice. I still can get pulled into, like when I was making the album, that felt like the number one priority on some of those days. It was like, should I spend a little more time meditating, or should I get to the rehearsal studio and start practicing? Well, I was feeling some urgency around practicing. I didn't skip meditation, but it was like I'm just describing how, no matter how, even with total commitment and total conviction that that's guiding everything, I can still get pulled into varying levels of kind of like investment in those priorities. And whenever I do, it's like, well, I'll say it in the affirmative, because the experience, usually the way the experience comes around is when I come back to meditating more, when I start to give myself longer sessions after maybe a period of abridging them for whatever reason, it's like I recall, oh, right, look at everything I can see when I'm using this sense organ. It literally changes the reality that I perceive, but it's not obviously my visual field. It's something deeper. And I think, again, I'm kind of like, when I get into periods of meditating a bit less, it's not helpful to judge ourselves for that, or to be, get down on ourselves for whatever, not, privileging that practice enough or whatever. But I think it's like allowing ourselves to shift and allowing ourselves to invest in what it feels like is right in front of us. There's a natural ebb and flow to it that I find generally effective, and generally it keeps me on course. If I allow, the more I can allow those ebbs and flows to happen, the more I don't feel like I'm being pulled away from the practice. It's just, there's a period of practice where it's background, and a period of practice where it becomes foreground again, and then it recedes, and then it steps forward again. So that's a process I've gotten comfortable with. But it's always so inspiring, and it feels like a new revelation each time to realize, to really come back to that center and spend a lot of time in no time, a lot of time in the dimension of no time, and recognize, oh wow, yeah, this is a sense organ. This is a it might as well be the sixth sense. You might as well just call it that. And I'm not convinced that there's not even other ones beyond that, but it has that same level of reliable information delivery. You know, the only difference is we don't have to use it to walk down the street or to go find food. You know, it's a sense that it's not it's not so linked to our survival as the other senses are. So it has to take place in a space, in a different kind of space. We have to nurture it in a way. But how amazing would it be if we recognized that, if that were something that from a very young age we were taught that it's an organ, that it's a capacity, it's a sense like any other sense, and we can employ it in our lives. We can put it, we can use it, and it will be as reliable as our sense of sight, as our sense of sound, as our sense of smell, taste, touch in navigating our reality. So this was just an impression that came to me, and for some reason it evoked a resonance with, oh, how this is really something significant, and framing it this way reminds me that, especially, it's a good reminder when I'm not practicing that much. It concretizes what that work is about, and it's like if you didn't have the sense of sight, you wouldn't miss it. If you didn't have the sense of hearing, you wouldn't miss it. It's kind of like this. If we don't know we have this sense, we don't miss it. But logging it and tracking the effect of it tells us there you can perceive, there's more to be perceived here. You have access to more. So maybe just keep that in mind and come back to that periodically. Don't let the absence of immediate access to it convince you that it's not a real thing. So anyway, that's what's coming through today, people. Thank you for watching. I appreciate you. Love you. Have a wonderful day. I'll see you tomorrow.